Aloha, and welcome to the Sylvan Bell Business Growth and Exit Strategy Podcast, your guide to building companies that command maximum multiples. I'm Sylvan Bell, author of 5 books on business strategy and sales, creator of the Sell Framework, Scale Framework, and Driver Test. I work with owners of $10 million to $250 million companies, whether you're scaling for growth or positioning for a profitable exit. Each episode breaks down one framework, strategy, or concept you can apply this week to grow revenue systematically, scale operations, and maximize enterprise value. Let's get started. Here we go. Episode number 14, the valuation impact of customer concentration. And if it's true that one customer can make you rich, it's also true that one customer can make your company virtually unsellable. And so concentration, it isn't a sales problem, it's a valuation problem. Investors are going to take a look and say, hey, what happens if this person, this company, this organization leaves you? What are you going to do? Now, when you take a look, it could be that you could last for 30 days, 60 days, maybe 90, but then you're in real trouble. You got to find somebody to take their place or somebody's to take their place. And I want to give you the flip side of this conversation too. It's not just the clients, it's marketing as well. It seems like every other month, Facebook, Google, whatever platform you happen to sell on, direct mail, the rules change. And when they change, you're left going, hey, I got to scramble and try to figure out what the new game is. I've seen companies that were top valued in the space of 2 quarters lose their valuation because they lost their main revenue strategy if it was through a social media company. So concentration signals dependency risk, and that's revenue fragility. Investors go, hey, time out. We've got some concerns. That's a ding. That's a dent. We're going to have to take some of your multiple away. We're going to have to take some of your future money that you're going to get paid away. And it could just be that it's tougher deal terms. It could be earnouts. It could be holdbacks. It could be, hey, we want you to stick around a little bit longer. And at the end of the day, to get the maximum multiple, you want to just be able to hand over the keys to the company and say, hey, thank you. Thanks for the check. Thanks for the wire. I'm going to move on with my life. Happens with a concentration of minimal clients. You have pricing issues, which means like if you have to increase prices because of, well, that's what's supposed to happen every year. And the fear is if I go to this client and I increase the price, they're going to leave. Well, now you've lost some of your optionality. You're losing the ability to predict, hey, do we have a client base that's going to stick around? So what you're looking for is the sensitivity. You want to know the range of what it's going to be. Today, personally, I had a professional service that I went to, and the person was like, hey, Scott, I got to increase my prices. And he gave me this story. Like, instead of saying, hey, look, the cost of the service has gone up, here's what it's going to be, it felt like an apology. As the one person who does consulting, like I'm the one person who understands, okay, the price has got to go up. And it's not something that's super expensive, but it's one of those things where some people would go, hey, I've got a problem here. You should have an automatic update where possible, right? I'm going to say you could have an update automatic possible where you have a price increase that's attributed to the cost of living index or to inflation or to something that says, hey, we can't keep it at this rate. I looked at a company to purchase probably 2 years ago. And the company came in, and there were some situations, I'm going to leave it pretty vague. There were some situations where they hadn't raised their prices in 8 years. They were 8 years behind the market. Okay. So when you take a look at that and you say, okay, well, I'm going to go in, I'm going to raise the price on the clients, you're going to have churn. You're going to lose. But you have to be able to provide the value. And so this was a smaller operation. They didn't have sophistication inside of the organization. It was a process where they were getting paid and they were making enough. But to bring it on board and do a tuck-in and bring it into a company, it wasn't possible. And they were shooting for the maximum multiple that they could. And I had to break it to them and say, hey, listen, you're looking at about a quarter of the value that you're thinking. And it wasn't done to be mean. It was because of the amount of risk. And so when you're taking a look at saying, hey, I've got 1 client, 2 clients, 3 clients, and it makes up the entire pool, when you go to them and say, hey, we're going to have to raise the prices, if you don't have that automatically built in, then you're going to have a problem because if you're behind the marketplace, The buyer is going to come in and say, hey, we gotta adjust, because they're shooting for profitability. They want to come in and make their money back. The contract structure that you have matters. Having long-term contracts, termination clauses, renewal patterns, all these things can reduce risk. But something that's based upon a handshake, like, way 1950 style, where, hey, we did business. I really wish that we could still do business that way. That would be fantastic. But today's day and age, that's not true. But when you live on that example, it increases the risk. When you have a predictable billing cycle with 2 years on the terms, somebody's coming in and saying, hey, we have the ability to know that roughly there's 2 years left in this profitability or in this revenue. We can take a look at it. But if it's like, hey, everything is month to month, then you're absolutely going to have churn. You're going to have some of those people leave. They're going to take off and I'm going to go find a new vendor of choice. There are times in certain industries where people heard that a company is sold, and the sales teams from other companies, they go after and say, hey, that company's sold. Like, you should switch. They're no longer the owners. And if you have a holdback, that typically counts against your holdback. So as many contracts that you can have in place, they're gonna give you the better valuation, or it's not going to go against your holdback where they said, hey, easy numbers, we sold your company for $1 million. There's $100,000 in holdbacks, and you lost $50,000 in contracts. That holdback is now $50,000. Having contracts gives you the ability to say, hey, you're not leaving just yet. Part of the feel is buyers have a worry of, like, what's going to change with the new ownership? Is it going to be the same service? Is it going to be the same processes? Is it going to be the same delivery? Is it going to be the same type of people? Is it going to be consistent? The fear is things are going to change, and that with that change, it's not going to be the way that it used to be. It's not going to be the touch that it used to have. So the more that you can put these controls in place, and that's part of the process when you go to sell, like, hey, we got systems and procedures in place. If we sell, it's going to be seamless. It make new ownership, new person. Here we go. Let's get this taken care of. And message from your sponsor, Scott Sylvan Bell. That's me. If you're getting value from this episode, here's how to go deeper. First, subscribe to my weekly newsletter, The Party, at scottsylvanbell.com. That's where I share the strategies, frameworks, and case studies I don't release anywhere else. You'll get one actionable insight every week you can implement inside your business immediately. Second, while you're on the site, download the complete Sell Framework, Scale Framework, and Drivers Test, all free with scoring guides, worksheets, and step-by-step implementation checklist. These are the same frameworks I use with $10 million to $250 million companies to build systematic revenue, scale operations, and maximize enterprise value. Go to scottsylvanbell.com right now, subscribe to the newsletter, grab the frameworks, and let's keep building companies that command maximum multiples. Let's get going. I want to give you a couple of examples of dangerous concentration. You can have fast growth from one or two accounts. This also includes custom work creep, where you're doing something that you typically outside of the norm because they've been a client and you're trying to keep them when you could replace them and put somebody underneath contract. These are all things to examine and take a look at. Sometimes what happens is people will take advantage of the relationship and say, I need all these special things done. Well, that takes your team away from being able to serve other people. That takes away attention. That takes away some ability of what you're doing. Does this fit every situation? No, but it's a different way to take a look at what's going on. These patterns, they slowly start increasing dependency, and it makes revenue look strong. So what you want to look for is anytime there's special rules. This customer gets special treatment. This person gets special builds. This person has one team member that's assigned when everybody else has floating team members. You're looking for the fragile relationships that could end up breaking when it's time for you to leave. And the only reason that they're sticking around is they were getting a deal on the custom work. And that is something to take a look at in your contract and in your pricing. What is the rate of custom? What is the rate of one person dependency? So if there's only one rep, you're going to be in trouble if that rep leaves. If there's only one salesperson that can deal with a certain type of people or a certain type of contract, like, you want to back that up. You want to have two. In deal structure, when you don't have concentration, it shows up in reps and warranties. Meaning that somewhere there's going to be money coming off if you can't fulfill on the promises that were made. So when an investor, when private equity comes in, what they're saying is we have proven history. We've got some history, and based upon this history, this is what the expectation could be or should be. And when you don't have these items in place where you're saying, hey, we need to reduce customer concentration on one or two people or one or two teams or one or two things, it's going to come back and get you, because it's going to be risk. And every time there's risk, it's a ding or a dent. It's like, oop, there's a risk. We're going to take some money from you. What you want to do is you want to find clients that you can add that are adjacent in properties or services. You could broaden some channels. You could package repeatable offers. The goal is to make the growth come from systems, not a single relationship, not custom. And you want to take a 90-day look at, like, what could we do to add another channel? What could we do to add more clients? So that we're not risking just having one or two or three or four or whatever the number happens to be, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, depending upon your industry and service. Concentration reduction is not just, hey, drop the big client, or grow everything faster. It's how do we do this strategically? How do we make some moves behind the scenes and ensure that if the big client leaves, that you're not saying, hey, we got to scramble. I believe I've shared this before on this podcast, that there was a company in the 90s, and what they would do is they would tell companies, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to help you figure out your pricing, and they would become the vendor of choice. And then after they got to know the books, after they got to know the company, they would come in and renegotiate the deal because they were 90% of the workflow. And the companies had to go with it because, well, they had gotten rid of all their other clients and they had single sourced 90% of the work to this vendor, this company. And it created a lot of problems. Take a look at your pipeline. Who's the most susceptible to revenue loss? Who's the most susceptible if you take away some of the custom work? And you could rate this company, this organization, and figure out what would it take to replace this person. If you're doing $1 million a year in revenue and this person takes 250,000 of the revenue and they left, how long would it take for you to replace them? Like that is like, hey, sales team, we need to find another person at 250, or we need to find 3 or 4 people at 250 if you can keep up with the output. Like, as a strategy, if you're looking for growth, hey, what does it make? What makes sense to acquire more clients at what revenue and how much work? Like, these are the questions to be asking. Sometimes when you take a look at the list looks diverse, but all the revenue comes from one product or service. So it's not just the client that you have. It's like, hey, how much revenue is tied to this one service that we provide? What happens if that service gets changed? In some industries and some products, laws change. And it helps to be aware of, like, okay, well, this law is going to change, and how much does it affect our business? I live in California. Everything here is illegal. Like, at some point, everything's going to be illegal. And so as a business owner, as a founder here, it's really trying to figure out, hey, what game are we playing this month? Because next month, they're probably going to change the rules. And so some of this comes into your forecasting of how do we fix what's going on. If you have concentration risk, you need a credible mitigation story. You need contract protection. You need more relationships. You need, a diversification plan. Because if you're signaling that you have all this chaos inside of your company, then what's going to happen is they're going to hit you with dings and dents. If you have the ability to prove, like, hey, here's what happens if we sell. Here's what happens if they leave. Here's what happens if they close their doors as one of our clients. We have proof that it's going to hurt, but it's not going to hurt as much. You can set a threshold inside of your organization. And this could be a report that you run at least every month. What's your concentration threshold? Is there anybody that's over 20% of our organization? And if there is, why? How did it get there? And what happens if they leave? How much of the workflow is going to be taken if that person takes off or if they close their doors? Sometimes it's not that they leave because they don't want to. It's just they go out of business. Or they get bought by a private equity company, a private investor, and they decide that they're going to switch vendors. Or they already have one in-house. Like, that's becoming more and more common, where big private equity companies are buying up all the services around what they already do because now they're bringing it in-house inside of their portfolio. So you want to have a top percentage per month of client database of who makes up the most amount of revenue and what happens if they leave. So when you take a look at it, concentration just isn't a number. It's a leverage to your certainty. It's a number that you can tie and say, hey, if I lose some of my clients, here's what we're taking a look at. If a competitor comes into town and undercuts us on price at the time of our sale, what's our game plan? If the new buyer saw this concentration, what demand would they make in the deal? What would they want me to give up? What kind of ding and dent would I be taking a look at? Be sure to take a look at your concentration this month. Have the conversation of who's our biggest client and what happens if they leave. And if they're over 20%, how do you replace them right now, today? What would that have to take? How much time would it take your sales team, your development team to find that replacement? Mahalo for listening to the Scott Sylvan Bell Business Growth and Exit Strategy podcast. Here's what's available to you right now. First, subscribe to this podcast so you get every framework we release. Second, visit scottsylvanbell.com to access the Sell Framework, Scale Framework, and Driver Test. All free with complete scoring guides and implementation worksheets. Third, subscribe to my weekly newsletter, The Party, where I break down strategies and frameworks you won't find anywhere else with one actionable insight every week. Go to scottsylvanbell.com and enter your email. And if this episode added value, share it with another business owner building a $10 million to $250 million company. Until next time, keep building companies that command maximum multiples. Aloha.